Hello and welcome to this interactive webinar, Leading Virtually, the 3 practice virtual leaders need to master. My name is Roberto Del Corso. I will be your host today, and I'm speaking from my home office in Zurich, Switzerland. It's absolutely great to have you all here. Welcome, Paul. It's great to have everyone. You know, this session is really designed to be interactive, and even though you may have your microphones muted, it doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. We will be using the group chat feature on Zoom. If everyone's familiar with that, I think most are. If not, move your mouse, hover, you'll see the chat box comes up, and we'll be using that. If you open that up right now, you're welcome. Type in, if you can hear me, see me, where you're from, go ahead and do that. That'll be great. Also, we will be using, if you open up your participants, also another box, you will see that in there you've got yes, no, you've got faster, slower, because sometimes I do talk too fast. You're welcome to raise your hand. We'll be using some of those features today. And also in the chat, in the group chat, you can send me messages, ask questions during the course of today's presentation, so you don't have to wait for the Q&A at the end. You can just, as we move along, go in, type them in. You know, so as I said, yeah, I'm connecting here from Zurich, and yeah, I'm excited to have you guys. And today's session on leading virtually is an extremely popular topic at the moment, given the fact that, you know, most of us are working from home. Most of us, you know, as I said, we had about 20 to 25 people signed up for it today. So it's a popular topic. We're mainly working from home, not by choice, but through circumstances. So, you know, in today's session, we're going to have a chance to ask questions, provide feedback, and give you some, get some of your experiences on how you feel, how you see things, and on your experiences. Again, if you have any technical issues, as I said, the session is being recorded, and I will send out the slides to everyone. So no need to worry. If you do get disconnected, just use the same link, get back in. And again, if you need to step out early, don't worry, never stress. You know, we'll get you the slides, we'll get you the link just in case something does go wrong. Now, as I said, my name is Roberto Del Corso. For those of you who haven't heard me speak before, you know, I've been leading virtual teams and actual teams, people teams, matrix organizations since around 2001. I've been working full-time remotely from home for the last 3 years. And, you know, my motivation is really to share some of the best practices, some of the data behind these practices, and to help you lead people virtually so that you can increase, you know, the people's motivation, engagement, which again will help increase performance. You know, and by the time you leave the webinar today, the session, you will have what you need so that you can start building good habits for leading virtually. So where you are leading people, you know, they are always working remotely. And, you know, one of the things that you need to do is you've got to set yourself up to lead remotely firstly and foremost. You know, as I mentioned, a couple of the icons we're going to use: chat box, check marks, raise your hand. We'll use them all. It is interactive. I don't want to talk at you. I want to talk with you. So we'll have an interactive session. Our agenda for today, just quickly going over it, you know, we're going to take a look at, as I said, some of the data, some of the research around remote working. We will also look at the 3 best practices that we feel virtual leaders need to be effective in leading people who are remote. We will look at being attentive and mindful, how to build community, manage performance and development. But, you know, before we get started, I just want to ask everyone a question is, you know, I want to go back to the time before COVID-19 and just get a little bit of feedback, you know. And, you know, my question to you, and I'm going to stick up the poll shortly, is how often did you work remotely before COVID-19? And I'm quickly going to go and hit the poll. So let me just get the poll, launch the poll. Yeah. So, you know, the question is, I'd love you to go ahead, select one of those as before COVID-19. How often did you work remotely? Never, once a month, once per week, more than 1 day a week, always. I see some answers are starting to come in. Excellent. just keep them going. We'll also be sharing those today so that everyone can have a look. You know, as I said, my experience is working from home for the last 3 years. It's allowed me, through my passion, through my business, to do a lot of the things I want. But there are some challenges with working from home. Excellent to see. Okay, let me end the poll. Let me share the results with everyone on that. So interestingly enough, 4% never, which is quite interesting. Then we've got, once a month, once a month, 1 day a week, more than that. And also, interesting enough, we've also got no one who says always. So we've really got a mix between people who have never worked from home before remotely, or people who have, but no one has been working from home on a full-time basis. So, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. In one of my last sessions I did on the subject, we saw that surprisingly 4% was 4 people. In this case, it's 44%. 4% of the people in that one had never worked from home. So that's really changed. And, a good example of that is probably my neighbor, Marcus. Marcus works for the Swiss national TV station, and he can easily do his work from home because he's a software programmer. Unfortunately, his employees, let's say, didn't trust him, so he was never allowed to work from home. And not just him, but generally the organization. Now that he's being forced to work from home, I'm sure that the company, the organization, will see that he's being very productive, and I'm hoping, and he's hoping, that they will allow him to work from home a lot more. So I do believe that working from home, whether in this environment or in the future, that's certainly something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of. Let me stop sharing the poll and close that one down. A global study in 2017 by Al Labs showed that the numbers were a little bit different to what we saw today. Again, here we can see that 32% never versus our 44%. So interesting. It lines up quite similarly. But what is also interesting is that, if you look at the 3 right-hand bubbles, that's more than 50% were at least working from home once a week. And as we know, that is going to increase in pretty much across every industry, in every organization, and in every country. In fact, if you go and look at the survey done by the Eurostats in Europe, they did a study, I think it was in 2018, and it showed that only 5.2% of people in Europe work from home, but they were expecting that number to continuously rise and increase over the years. Another group, Global Analytics, looked at how many people, or let's say how many jobs could be done from home. And the answer to that was 56% of the people, which really means that 56% of people could work from home full time and wouldn't need to go to the office, but up until now have not been working from home. So keep that one in mind. Also, working from home is a desire of many employees, many people. In fact, 60% of part-time or remote workers have, in another study, said that they would leave their job, move to another company for a similar pay, do a similar job, if it meant that they could work from home full-time. So in addition to part-time people and full-time people, there are a lot of people who actually would like to work from home, but currently are unable to do so. Again, the same study showed that more than half the people that work remotely or telecommute, as I like to call it, would like to ideally work from home 2 to 3 days. And in fact, Marcus, my neighbor, said the same thing, because at the moment he's been told he's working from home until the end of July, and he was like, oh no, I can't do this. I need to get into the office. I need to see some people. And I said to him, well, Marcus, what would be ideal for you to work from home? And he said, if I could work from home 2 to 3 days, I'd like to go to the office the rest. So that was pretty much, pretty much what the feel is for most people, that they would like to work from home 2 to 3 days, but not necessarily full time. There's also, the same survey then also went and asked and looked at, why do people want to work from home? And that was researched. And the first thing that pops up is the idea of choice, which is important. I feel that if I have greater choice, then I feel I have a more positive experience. Where in the current situation, we are not choosing, but we're being forced to work from home. So that, if you noticed, the biggest percentage there is really around increased productivity and better focus. That's the number one reason people choose to work remotely. They believe that they can be more productive and get rid of the distractions at the same time. The second one there, the second one there is really about no commute, which is also very important depending on where in the world you live and where you work. I remember in my last employment in corporate, I worked with a gentleman named Mike. Mike used to commute 2 hours every morning and every evening. He used to live just the other side of Bern. So commuting in and out, 2 hours each way. And it didn't take long for Mike to get pretty much fed up, tired of commuting, and probably within 12 to 18 months left and went and found another job. Not because he wanted to, but he just got tired of commuting. So work-life balance, saving money, are important for a lot of people when we look at some of the benefits and reasons why people choose to work remotely. Now, in other studies, however, we get some different results. So different study, different results, where in this case, the number one reason is that it eliminates commuting, and we've already spoken about that. So, when you ask your employees what are the benefits, you may see a lot of different benefits, but less travel, better work-life balance, or as I would prefer to call it, it's more work-life integration. But I don't know about you, I tend to find that I'm working much harder, much longer hours, and the research also would show that is supported as well. So some of you may be asking, where was the study conducted? It was a global survey conducted, covering all continents, if I'm not mistaken, went through all industries, all sectors, all environments. I just don't recall the number of countries that it reached out to, but certainly, better work-life balance is also really important, and we have a real opportunity to see some real results in that area. However, research also shows that generally we tend to work longer, and in fact, this you might find surprising. In fact, on average, people who work remotely work an extra 1 day per week. Now you're wondering, wow, how do they get the extra 1 day? Now, in most times, that's actually made up of the time that they commute. In Mike's case, you can imagine he was commuting 4 hours a day. Well, he could quite easily work at least one extra day if he had the opportunity to work from home. So, people who work from home generally tend, to add extra days in the week or create them because they're working longer. So another thing, flexible work hours is something else that is mentioned. And it's, and also the better productivity, cost savings. So all these things are employee reasons as to why it's better to work from home than going into the office. The study also, the study from Al in 2017 also showed that 71% of remote workers were happy in their jobs versus the 55% of people working on site. So generally speaking, I think it's safe to say that people who work from home are happier than those that go to the office each day. So if you go to the office each day, then, I'm not picking on you. This is just what some of the research out there is busy showing. The Global Workplace Analytics Organization also did a study and went on and created a calculator to show and calculate the benefits to the organizations, and it's a lot of this research that is allowing and supporting, people to work from home under normal circumstances, not under the crisis we're going through now. So this particular study, again, was done in the US, and the information and the data was validated by the US Department of Commerce and Labor. But I have seen something done similarly in Europe, and I think it was, again, Eurostat who did it. I just couldn't find the PDF. But, when we look at it, from an organization side, productivity increases. And an organization on average will see productivity increase 15% across all employees. the organization also gains money by not having to have office space. So there's a reduction of around 25% in office space, and the last couple of weeks I've been reaching out and speaking to many organizations, and this is one of the things, that they were looking at. They were going, well, we've been forced to work from home. We see it works. Do we really need all the space? Can we have more virtual offices? So that's something that, outside of the study, that's just my own personal discussions with people, but people are certainly looking at it. Another thing is that, it reduces absenteeism. People who work from home generally don't call in sick. They're just at home, so they just get up and get on with it and do it. No, they don't call in sick. And another huge benefit for the organization is when we look at turnover of people. Again, that also goes down, and that certainly seems to have something to do with them being happier at home. So there are a large number of benefits for organizations, as well as, or in addition to the benefits we see that employees having from working remotely. A recent study by Stanford also showed that people who work from home were 20% more productive, and half of them, and half as likely to go out and look for work, seek other jobs than those in traditional settings. So there's a lot of benefits to be had, both as an individual, both as an organization, but with it go lots of challenges. And this is going to be interesting. I want to see how, this goes down on the chat. Because what I would like to do is, I'd like to ask you, and please use your chat for this one, what are some of the major challenges that you have experienced, challenges, concerns, or that you've experienced, that others have experienced, that goes from, that goes with working from home, either full-time or part-time. If you can just go ahead, share anything that comes to mind that you've experienced in the chat box. I'll let you do that. Well, while you're busy doing that, some of the things I've seen, that keeps coming up, it's pretty much around technology and accountability. But I'd really like to hear what some of you have to say. So Teresa talks about setting boundaries, distractions, missing information from that you would normally have in the office. France, distractions, yeah, there's a lot out there. I'm going to keep that so we can keep looking at those. But yeah, technology, accountability, the one thing that I don't think has been shared here is ergonomics. And when I talk about ergonomics, that's the difference between working from home, sitting on your couch, where you walk away with like a sore back because you're not set up to do it, or having a proper office setup. And when I look around here, I've got 3 screens, 2 computers, adjustable table, great light. But again, I'm set up to work from home because I want to work from home. So that's, it makes a big difference, is to have positive ergonomics, and that's pretty much why you set up the way you'd be set up at the office. Another one that I know people mentioned is lack of human connection and all the distractions that come from things and the people around us. And for those of you who have never worked from home, what you're experiencing now is what I would not call the norm. This is not the norm, because most of the times, the kids, your spouse would be at work, would be at school, not the whole family is at home, same time, trying to work online together. I mean, just as in my example, Kathy, my wife, well, she works for an international school, and they've been working from home like everyone else. So, no longer do we have a rush out in the morning, but we tend to have the biggest traffic jam is around the coffee machine in the kitchen. But those are some of the things. But that's not the normal norm of what we're used to. When you think about it, what about noisy neighbors? I mean, just last week I was in one of our virtual sessions, and the complex we live in, the garden service comes around. So yeah, they are mowing the lawn, blowing blowers to clean the leaves out, and that's going on. So, these are some of the things that happen when you work from home, and, it might not be ideal, but that certainly is the way it works. And, and most people don't realize that, the noise in the background, because if you've got a good mic, most people don't think about the technology that goes with it. So get yourself set up, get yourself prepared to work from home. The other one that I've seen, and Abram, thank you so much, is a work-life balance. You have to set boundaries with your team. You've got to decide what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, especially if you've got global teams, where you've got calls early in the morning. And I know some of you are from global organizations, so calls early in the morning or late in the evening. Just as an example, late yesterday afternoon, I was doing a virtual online session, a global one. We had around 150 people connect, and we had people from the US, as well as from China and Asia Pacific. And I think we finished up here at around 6:30 in the evening. So if you think of the people in China, it was just after midnight. In the US, lunchtime. So, that's one of the considerations that we need to work through with our teams, is to understand, what are the expectations? How are we going to make this happen? And, another thing which is also both a benefit is to take some time out for yourself. If you're working from home, it's okay. You need to go for a walk, do some chores, but set those expectations up front with the team so everyone knows what to expect. Moving on, major challenges for individuals, and this one, it comes out again in the research, and not thinking about the current situation, because the research was all done prior to COVID-19, but in general, one of the complications of working from home is staying motivated. So if you're a leader, it's important to think about, the work that you're giving your team. Is it motivating? Another one to keep in mind is the sense of isolation that is felt, because guess what? When you work from home, you are on your own. You really are isolated. So I know it came up in the chat, but yeah, keep that in mind. Another thing that people who work from home feel is stagnation in growth opportunities. And what I really mean by that is a lot happens at work, a lot happens in the office. So if you don't have that connection, it's quite easy to feel, and I know we had this issue with some of our sales team in the past, where they felt there was a sense of imbalance or unfairness, to put it in a mild way, when you would compare people that were working from home versus people that were working in the office. They felt it was unfair and imbalance. So, it's important to keep that in mind. And we're going to take a look at these three challenges and, what leaders need to be aware and how we can deal with it. Because, these are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So, we really want to have a look at is how do we mitigate these challenges so that we can really take advantage of the benefits of working from home. So earlier we looked at the challenges with working from home. Now I would like you to help me with, what are some of the challenges you get from leading people who are remote, leading virtual teams? And we can take this from two different perspectives. If you lead a team that's remote or virtual, then, what do you see and what do you experience as the challenges and some of the complications that go with it? Or on the other hand, if you are a team member, what do you see as some of the challenges from being remote and being led? And I'd love you to share that in the chat. Love to get some feedback from you on that one. And we'll give that a couple of seconds. I mean, one of the things I can remember is, one of my, we did an M&A in about 2009, and I landed up leading a team virtually based in Europe, but they were scattered across 3 different countries. And to me, the language barriers, the cultures, that was certainly something that came up as a complication. Not an easy one, but something that I needed to work through. So, I'm curious, and Teresa's saying, as a team member, expectations to be available at any time. I love it. Yes, that's a nice one, Teresa. Again, it's setting up the expectations in front, at the beginning of any conversation. Set up the expectations with the team. And I'd love to get some other feedback in there. Some of the issues that I've also seen is, if you've never managed people remotely, then holding people accountable can become a complication. Many of us need to deal with virtual environments, but somehow it's very different from doing things face to face. And almost, the things that you've learned when you work face to face just don't apply in the virtual environment, and especially measuring accountability, measuring performance. Speaking to some people who have been going through this have just said, well, if I know that so-and-so is online, then I know he's working. Well, I call it measuring butts in seats. Maybe just isn't the right measurement to use, and maybe should never have. Let's have a look. Gino, what I feel that Gino, more time, rightfully so. Planning team meetings, aligned regularly. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for sharing those. Keep those coming in as I see them. I will certainly be popping those up. Because there are challenges with leading people which you don't see on a regular basis. I mean, maybe you see them once a month, once a quarter, or even once a year, so that those can be issues. In tying back to, what I was saying about the butts in seats earlier, I was speaking to a friend of mine who lived out in Zurich, gone back to the US. John used to head up one of the business divisions at Google. They had a wonderful campus here in Zurich. And, Google was kind of known for working long hours, which, kind of everyone assumed, hey, it's because, we've got a great campus, all activities are on site. But, the one day I was having coffee with John, and John said to me, he said, people complain that they work long hours. But if people actually worked while they were here, he says, they'd probably get their work done in about 4 hours a day. So, there's a big difference between being present and actually being productive. So back to how do we get and keep people motivated and engaged? How do I build and connect with them? How do I build trust with them without seeing them face to face and having that connection? And one of the first things that tends to go is trust, because trust is certainly more difficult to build and maintain in the virtual environment, but it's also easier to erode. Trust in the virtual environment is something that you need to keep in mind. And I don't know if I saw it in this one, but something that springs to mind is also team literacy. And what I mean by that is the team able to use the tools and the technology to be able to communicate with each other without seeing each other face to face? In a sense of belonging, these are all real valid points, and again, it comes up in the research as some of the biggest challenges. So looking at some of the three biggest challenges that come up from the research side really is about ensuring performance, getting the performance that we need from people, and how do we get them and keep them focused, energized, and engaged as well. And not just with ourselves, but with the complete team and the organization around. And that's something that, you need to do through coaching and developing people. You can't see it as a normal basis. These are issues that do exist, and we need to discuss them and tackle them. So, what we've gone and done is we've built a training to get the basic skills for people who lead remotely, so that they can get the benefits both for the individuals as well as for the organizations, to help them mitigate some of the challenges that people are going through and dealing with at this moment in time. And it's not just now, but again, one of the things that came out of the forum we did yesterday globally, and everyone was expecting that there would be a new norm, digitization, virtual learning, online meetings is something that's going to take, is going to become more of a new norm than what we have today. And with that, people working remotely. And here's, a quote from one of my strategic partners, Ken Blanchard, who happens to also be a hero of mine, and this quote from his comes from, way before COVID-19, even way before remote working really came in. But I mean, I love his quote that says, as a manager, the important thing is not what happens when you are there, but what happens when you are not there. And that kind of reminds me of, an old saying, and I have no idea where it came from, but, something along the lines of, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Well, that one kind of springs in mind with what Ken was saying there. So, a good sign of leadership is, can you take a 2-week vacation and not be constantly checking on your email? But at the same time, that things are moving forward, things are happening, and that same then happens in the virtual environment. A test of leadership really is, are things happening when you're not there to monitor them? Because again, motivation can only come from within through the individual and not from the environment around. So motivation has got to come from the person working remotely, the person working at home. And that's where we as leaders need to help. So I love this statement, that we all deserve caring and capable leaders, whether we work from home or in the office. So this training is designed to show leaders how to lead, be creative, build motivating work and environments so that, we can be engaging as if we were in an organization, even though we are remote, and, and make sure that people are working on the things that they're meant to be working on. And that's how we're going to drive the results. So, the important part is, how do you lead? I almost getting tongue-tied there. How do we lead remotely in order to be able to do that, to drive those results? As we start looking at the skills and habits that leaders need, we found that there were 3 essential practices that were absolutely critical for anyone leading remote workers. And then you've also got the complication is the leader being a remote worker himself, or is in the office? But, the first thing is, being mindful and attentive. The second one really looks at, community. The third one, accelerating performance and development. So the workshop is really about looking at the interactions, looking at the best ways that remote workers help them understand what it's like, what it's about being remote working, and how do we make remote working work. And, there's a lot of little things that you really need to do on a regular, consistent basis, that if you don't do them, well, these are the ones that really make all of the difference. And we're going to touch on some of them this afternoon, and that's how we go about creating that work-life balance, getting the performance, getting their engagement. And that's really what we need in order to be successful and succeed in this environment today. So let's take a deeper dive into each one of these. The first practice, there are 4 habits that, that we need. And the first one is being present. And, I know that this is one that people are struggling with at the moment. And I've seen it on video conferences. I've seen it on phone calls, because we're all so busy jumping from one meeting to the next. But as a leader, you need to be fully present. Let me say that again. As a leader, you need to be present. Even if it's virtual, you need to be present, because, your team really needs to know that you are there for them. And it's very easy for remote workers to feel like they are a piece of machinery or a piece of furniture. They kind of don't feel that you care. And we need to know that. So we really need to get to know them. We really need to pay attention to their individual differences, as well as treat them like human beings. So, that's really an important one. And we also need to, as leaders, be better at asking for feedback. Create the transparency that you need. And one of the things that tends to shock a lot of people is, I say, be prepared to ask and answer the hard questions. And what do I mean by that? When you're speaking to the people you lead, ask them, how am I doing? Am I meeting your needs? Is there something that, that you'd need that I'm not doing for you? Are there things that bother you? What are they? These aren't easy questions to ask as a leader, because sometimes you might not want the answer, but they're important ones, and I believe feedback is the breakfast of champions. So you've got to ask questions in order to create that presence. So there's much more that we need to do, but we need to be intentional. In the working environment, you need to be far more intentional when you lead virtually than when you lead face-to-face. One of the reasons for that is there's so much informal, casual communication that takes place in the normal office environment that doesn't take place in the virtual environment. I'm just going to quickly take a quick breath, quick sip. Oh, there we go. My mouth was getting dry. Then I know I'm talking too much and I should be asking you guys questions. Perfect. My timing was good. So when it comes to being present, this is one of the quote that actually comes up from a study we've done, where one person literally talks about, they love their weekly meetings because, it allows them to catch up on their emails. And you might be surprised, but I've seen that happen. And I've seen that happen not just with team members, but I've seen that happen with team leaders. I mean, I know of a sales director who on the odd occasion would be having his Monday team meeting, getting all the sales guys in, and while he was doing it, he was replying to emails. So he wasn't really being very present. So, that's absolutely important. So as leaders, make sure you're present. One of the questions I want to ask you is, what is the impact when virtual leaders are not present? I'm going to ask you to go onto the chat, type out some of your thoughts, experiences, what you've seen or heard of. What are the impacts when virtual leaders are not present? I'd love to hear and see what you've got to share with me on that one. Because, not being present certainly creates a lot of impact on the team. Yep, Dean says team loses interest and direction. Absolutely, absolutely. Some of the things that, I've seen in other discussions, it's around engagement. But yeah, I'd like you guys to be engaged and let me know, what are some of the thoughts, experiences? Disrespectful, yeah. Team starts to pull back and stops contributing. Oh, I love that one. That, the inclination not to contribute. Demotivation, yep, absolutely. It destroys trust. Work will not be done, yeah, absolutely. Work doesn't happen. Some of the things that also come to mind is, anarchy. Because, if the leader's doing what he wants, what are we meant to do? Or otherwise people feel false freedom, abandoned, disvalued. There's many different things. So, thank you for sharing that on the chat. It's absolutely great to get your experiences, your input. So the first thing you need to do yourself as a leader is to be fully present. And, we're going to talk about the importance of being on camera a little bit later, because that's certainly one of the ways to be more present and one of the ways to create that connection. Because in every phone call, video conference, phone conference, you need to be fully present and engaged with your team. You really need to be that model. You need to set the example. You also need to set the expectations of how we're going to be present during our meetings, and then it becomes easier to hold people accountable to that. Now, one of the best ways to mitigate and reduce some of these challenges is really to have team meetings, check-ins, regular check-ins. Let's do a quick poll, and I'm going to ask you, how often do you check in with your team, or how often does your leader check in with you? So let me just go and open up the poll, and I'm going to launch that one. So yeah, please go ahead, check in one of those. How often do you have check-ins with your team leader, or how often does your team leader have check-ins with you? They're starting to come in. I see we're getting more and more results. Awesome, and I like to see it from both different perspectives, and, never is, hopefully one we're not going to see, because it's one that's very hard to see, because in my last group, about 4% came up with never, and I can only suggest that, one practice as a remote leader is that if you need to adopt right away, if there's only one thing that you take away from today, is do regular check-ins with your team members. And that's, I'm not talking about the one-to-one team reviews where we check on activities and projects and progress and do that as a group. No. I'm talking about one-to-one, even if it's only 5 minutes per check-in. I would strongly suggest that you start doing that immediately. Excellent. So, okay. I don't know if anyone else wants to quickly, last chance for anyone who hasn't submitted their poll to select one and hit submit, and then I will end the poll. Okay, let's end the poll. So not in, not in. And let me just share those results. And it's awesome because we have an awesome group here. 86% say weekly, and I think that is absolutely spot on. So, that's an awesome group. No, brilliant. I love it. I love to see that we are connecting weekly. Yeah, I just want to quickly stop that one. And personally, I used to have 2 weekly meetings with my team. One was the general weekly progress report as a group, and then I would also have the one-to-one meeting. And this one's really about their time. I used to really say, because they would see it as one problem. They would see the meetings as the same, and I would say, no, 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 no. The second meeting is about your time to share. You ask. This is your meeting. How do you want to see things going? What do you need? And I know some organizations have a lot of agile or daily scrum activities, which is great. And in a virtual environment, you need to keep those going because that's absolutely important. And I think the frequency of once a week, as I said, is correct. As things now that we're in a crisis, I would even say if you can meet and check in more than once a week, probably even better, because I think over communication is far better than under communication. Speaking to a gentleman in South Africa last week, he was literally having a team, a one-on-one meeting, even if it was only 3 to 5 minutes, every day with his team, just to check in, just to get the feel, and then he would naturally have his weekly meetings with everyone. So that's the important one. So have more check-ins, because that's important. But you've got to find a fine balance, because if you're consistently pinging people about tasks or activities, then people quite quickly can feel micromanaged. So we need to find a balance for that. And, weekly, I think, seems to work the best. The research also suggests that, but I mean, keep in mind what I say about the micromanagement, because, one of the biggest benefits of working remotely is you want to feel that you have autonomy over your time, autonomy over when and how you work, and I think someone mentioned it earlier. I think it might have been Teresa who said, having to be available all the time. Well, again, that's part of the expectations that needs to be cleared up front. But also, if you consistently ping, and on the case of your team members, they're going to feel micromanaged, which is not a good thing. So quickly moving on, I see, we're moving on in time, and I do want to open up to a Q&A. So, once a week really seems to be the right one. But again, this is, a meeting that focuses on them, what they want to talk about. And if they want to talk about their projects, fine, let's talk about their projects. But it's really about, giving them a stage, a setting to ask questions, to ask what they need. And in this one, I'm going to say one of the things that you as leaders, we need to do is also try to not jump in and be directive. Because, when people come to you with a challenge that they're going through, then absolutely, I would ask them broad-based questions, try get them to provide the information, the answers, the possibilities, and only when necessary, then, dive in and be directive to it. And some people have also asked, well, should these one-to-one meetings be scheduled out? I would say absolutely schedule them out so that everyone knows when they are, at least once a week. And then also don't hesitate to have ad hoc ones as need be. And they can be as short as 5 minutes, but put those in the calendar. Absolutely critical. Well, we spoke briefly about, using video. And again, the research validates this, that, we need to use video in our one-to-one conversations. Again, use it in your team meetings. I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable being on camera. The more you're on camera, the more comfortable you become. I personally don't like seeing myself on camera. I don't like the sound of my voice, but it's one of those things. So that's me. But, I say as a leader, set the example, put yourself on camera. And again, you need to you need to put yourself on camera. And let me ask you a question. Why is it important for us to use video to help virtual communication? Go ahead in the chat box. Would love to hear it. Non-verbal communication, key. Absolutely. Non-verbal communication, body language, yes, the expressions. You can see the person's reaction. You can see if they're frowning or smiling. Absolutely. Gauge body language, no verbal signs. Absolutely. And seeing people is certainly a way to connect, and that helps build trust. The closest thing to a real meeting, absolutely, it really is. And the first thing that I see is, that we also need to change is what is our mindset about, professionalism. Because I know in the past, everyone would go, oh, you've got to have the right background, you've got to eliminate distractions. I'm all for professionalism, but I'm also for, hey, let's get real. And if I don't have the most tidiest room, that's great. Give people grace, And there's been meetings where a young child has walked in. My suggestion would be, hey, bring the child up on your lap, introduce them to the team, share, your family. I mean, you are integrating work into your home life. So share it, So when you're going into meetings, don't be hooked up on, it's got to be perfect. Yeah, when you're going into a meeting, let your family know, ask them not to be disturbed, but we all know that life happens. So let's move past those preconceived ideas about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Home environment is acceptable, yes. Yeah, so as I said, be the example. One thing that I say is don't make people feel guilty about not being on video. If people want to be on video, great. You be the example, you set the example, people will follow. But don't be overly concerned about some of the things that happen. Doorbells, kids, barking dogs, the garden service outside. It's all normal, and it should be expected in today's environment. And I believe that when you show up in a human way, it also reduces the stress that goes along with being on video. We're not going to be perfect, so it's okay. So set the example for your team and then let them choose, or otherwise set up the expectations ahead of time. Get the team together, get them to decide on the norms of what we're going to do as a group. Are we going to have our cameras on during our team meetings? If that's a decision the group takes, then we hold them accountable to that. It becomes a lot easier. As well as, I know that we've all got multiple tools, so we instant messaging, we emailing, we video messaging. Also set the expectation about the right time frame for people to respond. So, that's absolutely important. I'm also a big speaker, right? Big topic in terms of, I like the mute function. And the reason I say that, is we should use the mute function with all of our meetings, because I've seen, even when there's only 3 people, the likelihood that you speak over each other, it's just constantly happening. So I think even with 3 people, use the mute function, unmute each other, use that as a common practice. The second practice is fostering community. So people really struggle with this in the virtual environment. And this really talks, about the association to building trust. So we need to make sure that people understand the technology, that there's support for them. And, my suggestion is, invest in helping them invest in connections, not just one-to-one with you when you're having team meetings, but also amongst the team themselves, and make sure that you create time to celebrate, because quite often people forget to celebrate when they can't meet face to face. So celebration is certainly an important one. And some ideas on building trust, just to help you, be prepared when you have a team meeting. I think it was mentioned earlier about planning it, but reach out to the people. Help them, ask them, what can I do to help you? What can I do to support you while you're working? Make sure that they know you are there for them. So that certainly will help build trust. Also, very important is be responsive. And what I mean by that is, it's important for remote employees, again, as I said, set expectations So for example, if you're going to send me an instant message, then I'll quickly respond back to you. If you're going to send me an email, I'll respond in a couple of hours or by the end of the day. But again, that's got to be done as a team up front. And also, with Skype and MS Teams and WebEx, make sure that you have your status up to date. So that, and also one of the things is don't go ahead and just block time in the calendar saying that you're not available when you could be available for your team, because at this moment in time your team needs you more than they would in a face-to-face environment. So make sure you are there for them. And also commitments is important, because if you have commitments, you as the leader, you need to lead the example of meeting and seeing those commitments through. Because as I said, trust in the virtual environment is very easy to erode and hard to get back. So, commitments, see them and follow those through. And, as we start to slowly go back to work in some parts of the world, we also need to make sure that we treat everyone fairly. So, my thoughts would be, if you've got some people in the office and some people that need to dial in, then, my suggestion would be fine. Have everyone dial in, put them all on the same level playing field, even if they're dialing in from the office sitting next to each other. But this way, you certainly will eliminate some of those side conversations that happen. Or quite often, people start scribbling on whiteboards that the people remotely can't see. So that eliminates that. So, level the playing field and make everyone dial in. That would certainly be one of my suggestions, is do that. And again, also show your appreciation, give people the support as well as protection. And protection is really about making sure that people know that you've got their backs when they're remote or in the office. Then they feel they're there, you there. I mean, I had a boss who I could, he told me to go in X, Y, Z. I would do that. If it didn't work out, he would go, my fault. He wouldn't blame, he wouldn't look, he would take responsibility. So, make sure you've got their backs so that they can go out and try and be creative and do things differently. And also promote them, give them visibility both inside the organization as well as outside the organization. So support and protect your people. The other one that I think is especially important in the current environment is the support of technology for people. So, firstly, you need to spend some time, become competent in the technology yourself, whatever it is, Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Adobe Connect, whatever you're using, become an expert yourself. You're going to spend some time, but it's a great time to invest. Then also identify some mentors that can help and serve the rest of the team. And also important is, invest time in training the team with the technology that you're planning on using. Don't take it for granted. Not everyone is at the same level. And the research is also very clear, as well as, as hopeful, I think, that this crisis will go away, hopefully really soon. But when it does go away, we need to bring the team physically together whenever it's possible. Ideally, it shouldn't be less than once a quarter. And especially if you're starting a new project, bring them in, let them meet face to face. I appreciate that, with things going on, we can't always meet face to face. We don't have the budgets, the means, the time, but investing in bringing the team together face to face at least once a quarter is absolutely ideal. And some of you may be asking, well, why once a quarter? I believe that at least once a quarter is what you need, the minimum to keep that connection. It's something like seeing people break bread together. You see people hug, shake hands, give each other high fives, fist pump. It just creates a connection that, unfortunately, with all of the technology, we can't create virtually. So absolutely importantly, as we're getting close to the end, and I do want to keep some time for the Q&A, it's really about don't forget to celebrate virtually. And you can do this in various ways, because I've seen teams do virtual happy hours. I've seen other teams do virtual coffee breaks. I've heard about teams, who have a team meeting and it happens to be over lunch, and then the team leader would organize and have pizza or healthy food delivered to everyone at their homes. So these are some of the things that you can do in order to be creative, to celebrate together, because it's important. Don't underestimate the power of celebration as a team together. And it doesn't just have to be the big milestones, but also celebrate the little wins. Yeah. You know, the last practice that I want to have a look at is, you know, accelerating performance and development with others. You know, and one of the keys to accelerating performance and development is not to focus on the activities that people do, but focus on the outcomes that you want them to achieve. So make sure the projects and the work that they've got is outcome focused. You know, give them a clear picture on what they need to achieve, when they need to achieve it by. You know, because remember, think of yourself, you know, you're working from home, and I've experienced it over the last couple of years. The hardest person to be accountable to is myself. You know, so when other people aren't around, yeah, motivation, accountability is something to keep in mind. So show them the clear picture of what they need to do, when they need to do it by. And then, of course, you know, virtual environment, set up some visual virtual scorecards that everyone can see. Everyone can see, you know, where everyone else is at. That way you keep the level of transparency available for everyone. You know, another thing we need to do is, you know, is encourage self-reliance, you know, and let's have some good coaching conversations with your team. You know, don't be overly directive, assign work, tell them how to do it, but rather coach them in developing, especially if it's a new task that maybe they haven't done. You know, help them, guide them, but you don't necessarily need to be directive. You know, the third one is facilitate networking, you know, and that's both within the team, outside of the team, but give the team the visibility to the organization as well. You know, and the last one that, you know, you really should be paying attention to is career development, because, you know, have a quick sip again. Because, you know, yeah, the last one, this really is a reality. You know, remote team members feel that their chances of growth are probably as remote as their managers. So if you're not having, you know, career development conversations with them, then, you know, trust me, believe me, they are probably having those same discussions with someone outside of your organization. And, you know, you want to take advantage of a lot of the research that we've looked at today that says, you know, people who work remotely are happier and stay longer. But again, if you're not having those discussions, they won't happen. You need to create them. So those are the 3 practices and the 4 habits of each practice. Each of the practices that we cover during the Leading Virtually training. And if it's okay, I just want to share 2 lines about it. I mean, you know, the training in itself is designed to be 3 virtual 2-hour sessions. You know, participants receive a workbook, and there's also an assessment called Leading Virtually. It's a checkup that needs to get done. And that's all I want to say about that one, because I want to keep some time for the Q&A. So, you know, I really want to say thank you for everyone who has participated up until now. I'm going to open up the Q&A and unmute everyone. I know we pushed on time, so I recognize we may not hit all the questions. But again, you've got my email address up there. I'm going to share some resources with you, a couple of white papers, an overview. I've got some resources to share. They'll come in an email. Let me go ahead and unmute everyone and start to get the Q&A going. And now I've got an unmute all. So it's a double unmute system. So what you might need to do, if you've got a question, accept the unmute, and by all means, I would love to hear your questions that you may have. Questions, concerns, thoughts, anything that you may have. Okay, well, and you know, if you're like me, that, you know, quite often I think about the questions after the session has ended. You have my email address, roberto@dalcorsogroup.com. You know, send it in. I'll do my best to answer it as best as I can. Or if you've got some questions and want more information about the program, that's also great. I will certainly do that. You know, something that came up quite often was around engagement through the questions and what we've shared. And again, it's engagement. AB is running. Thank you so much. Thanks for being on. But yeah, one of the questions is really about engagement, and engagement in normal or in a crisis circumstances. And that, it really has a lot to do with the situation you're in, because keeping engagement virtually is much harder, and it's certainly much harder in this environment. So, again, connecting with people is absolutely critical. One of the things I've seen many organizations do is that they absolutely connect, even if it's just a couple of minutes, but keep that connection going. And it's just about spending some personal time. How are you doing? How can I help you? That's important. So keep those one-to-one discussions. Those are critical. Those are powerful. I haven't had a quick look. Any questions from anyone? I know people need to run. And again, I will share the slides. I will share the live recording of it, but I do want to give the opportunity if there are any questions. Okay. It doesn't seem like there's any questions, so I'm going to get ready to close the session. And pretty much, and I want to say absolutely thank you to everyone for being on. Look out for the emails. I will share the slides, I will share the link, and I will share a couple of white papers with everyone, some of the research behind it. So that concludes our session. Thank you everyone for being on the Leading Virtually, the 3 practices virtual leaders need to master. And I certainly hope that you will join us on one of our next webinars, and hope to see you in the near future. Bye for now. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, guys. Bye.